very special program about Rabbi Zalman. This year is a year which is called the year of Hakel. And in the Torah, there is a commandment that at the end of Deuteronomy, the Torah says that the year after the sabbatical year, the verse says, Hakel es ha'am, gather the nation, ha'anoshim, v'taf, men, ladies, and even babies, gather them to Israel, to the temple. L'man yishmu, l'man yilmadu, in order that they should hear and learn v'yara es Hashem, and have awe of God. And this is a commandment that took place every 7 years. The whole nation came to the temple, men, ladies, and babies even, and they learned, and the king would read the Torah to them, and Maimonides, who usually in his book doesn't give he has many books, but one of his prime books is called Mishnah Torah, where he codifies all the Jewish laws, and he doesn't give that much of the reasons of the commandments. And here he says a very interesting reason in the book of Maimonides. He says the reason for this commandment was that in order to inspire the Jewish nation, we were all inspired when we stood at Mount Sinai and we saw the awesome sight of the giving of the Torah, the commandments, and heard the commandments from God. But that could wear off, that inspiration could wear off. And the Torah says every 7 years, the whole nation could come together to the temple, and then it will have like the same intensity and power of giving of the Torah. It will re-inspire the nation. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a very strong request in this year, which this year is a Hakel year, last year was a sabbatical year, and even though we don't have the temple right now, very soon Mashiach will come, and we'll have it again, we still could keep this commandment in the spiritual realm by getting together as much as possible in this year in order to learn more and to hear more and to inspire ourselves. And we'll have the special power of the Hakel, the special power of this year to inspire us and give us strength for the future. So when we knew Rabbi Dalfin. He came to interview Rabbi Zalman many years, 10 years, I don't know how many years ago it was, but how many years ago was it?
13.
13, okay. So he stayed by us, and we grew up together in Borough Park in the same small community. Most Chabadniks live in Grand Heights. Only a few misfits live outside of
Talk for yourself.
So he was a little older than me, but I would see him in shul, and I definitely knew his father very well. He was a small shul, and his father's personality, and I know his brother. His brother was in my class. So we knew Rabbi Dalfin. We heard about the book. He was in touch with us when he was making the book. And he offered to come speak. And we thought, oh, well, what a great event to the same idea of the Hakel, to inspire ourselves and to learn. And that was the spirit with which we made this event, to learn more and to inspire ourselves and to grow and learn from discussing and examining the life of Reb Zalman. And what stood out in Reb Zalman's life is that he had this, I don't want to say dual personality, it doesn't sound well, but he had this duality in his life, which is very unusual. Very unusual. People don't realize how unusual it is. Usually a person puts himself in a certain framework, a certain mode, and that's where he stays to. It's very confusing to have more than one mode in your life. And yes, maybe we'll visit sometime to some other event or some other synagogue, maybe. But to have two things going on at one time is very unusual. And I think Reb Zalman, I think it was unusual for Reb Zalman. I remember the first time Reb Zalman came to us, some 25 years ago. Might be off like 3 years, like you said. But when he came to us, the first time was a Purim. And when he came, we were having end of Purim, we always have a meal, a public meal for Purim. And he came over and he told me, he told me, and he gave me this whole reason why he's coming. This whole thing, and I don't even know how it's Purim, I don't remember exactly what he said. I was a little under influence. But I saw from that it wasn't easy for him to come. It wasn't self-understood. It wasn't that simple that he's coming. And then when he felt comfortable, he started coming on a regular basis. But I thought it took effort. It wasn't simple. It was these two parts of his life was something that we thought is worth examining and learning from. Rabbi Chaim Dalfin did research on this subject. He is a well-known mashpia, which means he's a well-known teacher of Hasidic teachings. He has many books on Hasidic teachings. He is also an historian. He wrote many books on historical books. So he has a lot of experience in doing biographies. And he writes in his book, he sent me a PDF of his book, and he writes in his book that this was his hardest book that he wrote. So I imagine that for some reason this was not so simple. Maybe he'll explain that if he wants to. But he's an author of 90 books, historian, researcher, and ethnographer of the Jewish world. He has an educational program in Israel, YouTube channel, and is a recording artist of Hasidic Nigunim. He interviewed Rav Zalman in 2010. He just published his latest on Rav Zalman, and it will be available after the talk. He is an international sought-out speaker, endorsed by professors Jonathan Sarna, Lawrence Schiffman, and the late Dr. Abraham Parsky. He lives in New York with his wife and his children. We are very honored to have him with us today. Please, Rabbi Dalfin, b'vakasha.
What I'm going to do today is Fabrengen with you. You know what a Fabrengen is? Fabrengen is an informal gathering. We got to relax and be chilled, and that's the mode. This isn't a formal lecture. I know you think it is a formal lecture. I don't want a formal lecture. You know why? Because Reb Zalman wasn't formal. Anyone that knew Reb Zalman, he was the furthest thing from a formal person. The book that Rabbi Chaim mentioned, I do want to say right from the beginning that Rebbe Scheiner really gets the credit for this event. As much as Rabbi Scheiner is the rabbi here, but she was fantastic and really deserves a big round of applause. So, I write about individuals and communities that at times it feels like there's disparity. There is, differences. Rabbi Chaim used the word duality. And I focused in the book primarily on his early years. And there's two reasons for it. One, because I come from the same school. And I knew the same people he knew, although he was much older than I. But I and he shared what we call in Yiddish the kishkis. The kishkis, the inside of Jewishness, not the outside. Reb Zalman came from the kishkis. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was born in Poland in 1924. He moved in 1925 to Vienna. He was raised in a most wonderful environment until the war broke out, till Kristallnacht in 38, and then the war in 39. And he came out of that mold. He was a Galician Jew from Galicia. And then his parents and his family were saved. They came to America. We'll talk about that in a few moments. So you're talking about an individual who was very colorful. He comes from that world. He comes to the world of Chabad. He didn't know Chabad till 1939. Now, he was born at 24. He was, not a grown adult, but he was a mensch, a big mensch. And he was so intelligent. and so gifted. He really was a gifted person. I assume most of you knew Reb Zalman, especially people who were a little younger. He was a gifted person, a very gifted person. You don't find such people, really. And he comes from this world to America. And in America, he reintroduces himself to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the sixth Rebbe of Chabad, who survived Stalin and then the Holocaust. Comes to America in 1940 in a wheelchair as a broken man, but he has an assistant, his son-in-law, the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, our Rebbe today. And he came in June of 1941, and he helps his father-in-law for 9 years to rebuild Chabad. Reb Zalman comes out of that Chabad. He comes out of the Chabad of the 1940s. Now, that Chabad of the 1940s was during the Holocaust and then post-Holocaust. It was a very different Judaism. Within the so-called Orthodox world, it was a very different orthodoxy. What we consider kind of normal today and acceptable and what is expected was not the case then. And again, we only have a little bit of time, so I can't give you examples for each. I've written a lot about this. I wrote a book called Chabad and Orthodoxy, 1900 and 1950. I studied Chicago and Baltimore and Philadelphia and St. Louis, the Bronx, Williamsburg, Brownsville, Brooklyn. And I did a big study on the Judaism of between 1900 and 1950. With the previous Rebbe in 1929 and 30 went to visit for almost a year. He went to all these places that I mentioned, so I studied that. Reb Zalman came out of this Lubavitch. So this is really what I want to talk about. I want to introduce and share his humble beginnings, so that when we talk about Reb Zalman later in Winnipeg from 1956 to 1975, 19 years in Winnipeg, there's a lot about that here in this book. It's a whole world. Then from 1975, I believe to 1994 or so, or 95, he was in Philadelphia. That's another world. And then he comes to this beautiful Boulder. The last time I was here 13 years ago, I was introduced to the mountain lion. Rabbi Schachter took me somewhere around here to give me a little tour, and all of a sudden I saw things running. I asked him, what's running on the mountains? He said, it's a mountain lion, stay put. You remember? He doesn't remember. I remember like yesterday. Why did I come in 2010, 4 years before Reb Zalman passed away? Because Reb Zalman invited me to come. I grew up in the Chabad of the 1970s, 60s and 70s. And as I studied more and was involved, I heard about two figures in Chabad that caught my attention. One was Reb Shlomo Carlebach, and one was Reb Zalman Schachter. They were the talk of Chabad because they were so involved, and then they chose careers and paths that were not like the conventional, atypical Chabad. Yet they were so Chabad. And that's what Rabbi Chaim alluded to. So who were they? What were they? How were they? Why were they? I wrote a book called The Real Shlomo. It's been reprinted. Baruch Hashem, it's sold out. The Real Shlomo. That was also a fantastic insight in studying Reb Shlomo, 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 Shlomo And I wrote, Rabbi Chaim said, why is the hardest book? Because the hardest book is to understand the person, try to understand the person going back 60, 70 years of his life. He invites me here, and here is the actual house where he and Eve lived, somewhere around here in Boulder, and we're sitting here, we're schmoozing. Reb Zalman and I are schmoozing. 2 hours of schmoozing. The time flew. It was great. The late Michael Kozakov videoed it. Today it's available now on YouTube. There are thousands of hits. I constantly get feedback from people, Jewish, not Jewish, all kinds of people. It's my #1 film, video clip that's most accessed. In this interview, which this book comes out of this interview. In fact, chapter 6 in the book is a transcription that I did of the interview. Almost verbatim. Almost. Have some water, please. What made this? Michael Kozakov told me, Rabbi Dalfin, this was the best interview ever. And I'm not saying that to toot my horn. Why was it such a good interview? Because he and I come, as we say in Yiddish Hebrew, from the selben cheder, from the same cheder. Cheder means a Jewish school, when you're in elementary school, and you play with each other, and you bother each other. So Reb Zalman and I come from the same cheder. And I remember during the interview, he went into Yiddish many times. Thank you. He went into Yiddish. And then he said, oh, I'm supposed to speak English for the interview. But he says, when I see you, he says to me, when I see you, and I see your beard, and I see your yarmulke, and I see your mannerisms, I remind myself of 770, 1943 and 44. That's the hub of Chabad Lubavitch, of the Chabad movement in Brooklyn, New York, in Crown Heights. We call it 770. I'm sure the rabbi and the rebbe should have told you about it. And what did we discuss? What did we discuss? We discussed his rabbis, his teachers, the fights they had, the fights, the shtick they did, the troublemaking. And then he discussed with me stories that he personally had with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe and our Rebbe. I want to give you a few examples. 1950, Purim. I'm trying to mention Purim. 1950. The previous Rebbe passes on in January 1950. There is still a question who should be the next Rebbe, because there were two son-in-laws, Rabbi Garari and the Rebbe. Rabbi Garari was an older son-in-law, but most people wanted the younger son-in-law, the Rebbe. And this was an ongoing issue during that year. But Reb Zalman told me, and it's on the YouTube. He says, I went on Purim to the Ohel, to the previous Rebbe's holy gravesite, in Queens, New York, which you can go to today. And if you're making a stopover, it's suggestible, go there. It's a great place to say a few words. It's a great holy place. Anyway, and he comes back to 770, and the Rebbe meets him. And the Rebbe says, at that time he wasn't called Reb Zalman, he says, Zalman. They knew first, Zalman. What did you do at the Ohel? What did you talk to my father-in-law? My father was buried there. He's a holy person. You spoke to him, right? He says, yeah, I spoke to him. What did you ask him? I asked him for three things. One, I asked him that you should become the Rebbe. In other words, not the brother-in-law. Even though you're younger, but I know I'm paraphrasing. I know your brilliance, and I know what you will do in the future, like sending Rabbi and Rebbe Schachter here to Boulder, Colorado, which isn't Brooklyn exactly. The Rebbe had that vision in 1950, and Zalman smelled it. So he says, I prayed for you to be the Rebbe. That's point number one. Point number two, I prayed to God that God send you children, give you children, because at that time, him and his wife, the Rebbe and his wife, did not have any children. And the fact is, they never had children. They have thousands of children, people who admire them and respect them, but biological children, they did not have. And point number three, I prayed that you will be the Mashiach. That you will be the Mashiach. And when Zalman told me that really threw me, the third point threw me for a loop. Because everyone says, everyone who didn't do research on Reb Zalman says, that he was more of a follower, a chassid of the 6th Rebbe than the 7th Rebbe, because he was in the yeshiva as a student from 42 to 44, 45. It's like when you go to a university, right? Your professors, when you're young, they become your teachers. Seldom does one come to admire someone later in life, except this wonderful scientist who's still studying, thank God, using your brain. We should all do the same thing. So Zalman saw in the Rebbe that he has the potential to be the Mashiach. And that really caught my attention. And he saw that in 1950. You can see it in 1994, 1950. Zalman and I spoke all about Hasidus, Jewish mysticism, Chabad, teachers, and things like that. We did not discuss really Jewish renewal. Although he told me briefly some of his ideas. In fact, he took me into his basement and he showed me on the wall a picture of the previous Rebbe, a picture of the Rebbe, a picture of Mr. Thurman. Howard Thurman. Zalman was a very broad-minded person. And truth be said, the Orthodox community could not relate to his broad-mindedness. They couldn't relate and understand it. Why that is needs an entire lecture for itself, but I'm giving you the bottom line. So here's the question. How is a person like Reb Zalman, who comes out of the kishkis of Chabad, there's another word we use, the smetana. Does anyone know what smetana is? Anyone speaks Yiddish fluently as smetana? Sour cream, right. The best. He comes out of the best of Chabad. His rabbis were students of the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. How does he transition later in life into being the Reb Zalman that many of you knew as the founder of the Jewish renewal movement? I can't really answer that question because I didn't study in depth his Jewish removal movement as it applies to him. I didn't. But what I could say is, because he was such a colorful person, and he was such an open person, he was able to go to places that most others couldn't. That much I do understand. So here it is. It's 1945, the draft. You have a war going on, there's the draft. Zalman had a best friend called Abraham Weingarten. They grew up together in Vienna. It's in the book. He happened to be a Rebbe of mine, a teacher of mine in 3rd grade in the Lubavitch Yeshiva, the Chabad Yeshiva, which I learned still in Bedford Dean, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which is a neighborhood next to Crown Heights. Anyway, they were best friends. They both go to the draft board. You gotta check, they're gonna check you, you know? You gotta go to the army. There's no skirting, we need soldiers. There's a war going on. People think that all Orthodox people, and many and most, are skirting the army. Zalman and Avraham didn't skirt the army, and the others, they were going to go. But they had to be healthy, right? So there was, I forget what street, in Manhattan. They went. It's a long story, making it short, it's in the book. So Weingarten comes in, and someone's there, and he looks at him, and he checks him, and he says, let me ask you a question. You go to the movies? He says, movies? I'm a yeshiva boy. I go to yeshiva. We don't go to the movies. We study Talmud. We study all day. He says, do you have a girlfriend? Oi! A girlfriend? Oi! I gotta close my ears. A girlfriend. What? You want to, you out of your mind? He says, you're not normal, you're exempt. True story.
Oh my gosh.
Then comes Zalman's turn. They went different rooms. Zalman goes in, have himself checked. And Weingarten's waiting, you know. And there was a line of people. And he said, sorry, you have to leave. We need the room. Like, you know, there's no room for you. You got your test, go on, move. But I'm waiting for my friend. Wait outside. He waits outside. No Zalman. Half hour, an hour and a half. He says, I'm going back to Crown Heights. I'm going back to 770. 5-6 hours later, Zalman comes in. And Weingarten says, Zalman, where were you? You philosophized. What were you doing? He said, I'll tell you what happened. You see these things? They're called tzitzis, right? The tzitzis, there's a garment under my shirt, right? Zalman wore this. Same thing I'm wearing. They told him to take it off. They have, you have to get undressed. We have to do the x-ray, check you. Zalman said, I'm not taking it off. But if you're in one place, you're allowed to take it off. I'm not taking it off. So you know what he said? Okay, I'll take them and I'll throw them over. It's on this side and this side, so you can throw it over the back. They take because the chest now is exposed. They take the x-ray, and somehow they see a line. Oi! Tuberculosis! This, that! You need more tests and more tests. What happened? That's why it took hours. What happened? The back of the tzitzis somehow came out of the x-ray. But that was Zalman, 1945. Weingarten took off his tzitzis. A regular fellow would take, a regular Orthodox Hasidic Jew would take off the tzitzis. Zalman didn't. This was Zalman, 1945. I'm sharing with you these stories to make it clear to you who he was at the time. He told me himself that he checked with the Rebbe about going to college. He pursued his degree, right? And he got a BA, I believe, at Boston University.
Masters.
I'm sorry?
Masters.
I'm sorry.
Pastoral psychology.
Yes, thank you. It's in the book, but you know it better.
Not better.
That's good. I like that. He asked the Rebbe whether he has permission to do that. Now, why did he do that? Why did he do that? I'll tell you why. Because in 1945, he was chosen with others to go to New Haven, Connecticut, to be a teacher in the Lubavitch Yeshiva in New Haven. Okay. In addition to that, people don't know this, the Chabadics don't know this, but really he had other responsibilities on behalf of the previous Rebbe in New Haven. In 1948, 47, he leaves New Haven and he goes to Rochester, New York. He goes there to save a yeshiva that was dwindling, the Chabad Lubavitch Yeshiva of Rochester. He's unable to save it, but he told me he neutralized it in a way that it ended peacefully. There's a lot of history there. I've put some of it in the book in the footnotes as well. I don't want to, By the way, in my books, you have to read the footnotes. You don't have to read them, but if you really want the kish-kish, you gotta read the footnotes. So Zalman goes on behalf of the previous Rebbe there, and he was struggling with parnasa, with a livelihood. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for many people. Then he takes a job in 1949 in Falls River, I believe. And as a rabbi, Hebrew school teacher, camp, and I put some pictures of that in there. You can see him leading a mock Pesach Seder, putting on the white, kittel is called, that you wear the Seder, and like a cantor's hat. Then in 52, I believe, he's in New Bedford. Yeah. In New Bedford, he becomes a rabbi in New Bedford. Listen, if you have a stable job with an income, you're not going from New Haven to Rochester to Falls River and to New Bedford. In 48, he has his first child. And I found a record of that in the newspaper, and I put it into the book when he was born. By the way, there are 20 pages of newspaper articles of Zalman's lectures all over the country. It's very fascinating to see where he was, when he was, what he lectured on. It's very interesting. I found a lot of material, and I included it. Because it speaks for itself. It speaks volumes. And then, so he sees now he needs something solid. To get a job as a Hillel director, you needed to have an MA. You can't become a Hillel director, at least then, without a degree. He gets the degree, he schleps down to Boston. He tells over how he davened mincha the afternoon service in a corner. I mean, there are many stories. He was what you would call, at the time, a classical Orthodox Jew. Okay, is that clear to everyone? At that time, he was a class. If you pray 3 times a day, whether you have a minyan or you don't, you're a classical Orthodox Jew. I'm not saying someone who belongs to a Reform or Conservative temple doesn't do that, but most people who pray 3 times a day and make sure they do it, you would put them into that category. Okay. But he wants to be a Hillel director. Now listen to this. They give him a choice. Jacksonville, Florida, or Winnipeg. Has anyone here been to Winnipeg? You're from Winnipeg. How many years is it not cold? How many months is it not cold in Winnipeg in snow?
Hour and a half.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. And Zalman and his wife, Fagel, they choose Winnipeg. They're there 19 years. Why? Because he wanted to be in a place where there's a kosher mikveh, for his wife to have a kosher mikveh and other people to have a kosher mikveh. And Jacksonville didn't have it, and Winnipeg did have it. Because the Winnipeg Orthodox community, conservative community, goes back, way back. And they had shuls, and they had a mikveh too. Kosher butcher. I've been in touch with Bernie Ballin, the editor of the Jewish Post and News of Winnipeg. We've had a lot of conversations, and hopefully we'll get to do an event there. How am I going to get there when it's not snow is a different question. But anyway, so he goes there because he has now stability. He has a livelihood, simply speaking. When you don't have a steady income, a steady livelihood, it's a problem. We're spouses, we're people, we know what it means to bring bread to the table, right? You don't bring bread to the table besides your wife or your husband knocking you over the head and saying you're a bum, get outside, don't be a lazy good for nothing, you know? My father is a survivor, is a Romanian Jew. Rabbi Chaim mentioned my father, he knew him well, knows him well, thank God, he's 85, let him be well. My father taught us, kids, as children, you go out and work. But I have a degree, I'm waiting to be a scientist, a mathematician, or a rabbi. Don't tell me it's not fitting for you because you're a prima donna. In California, we call them the Valley Girls. In Yiddish, we say, es passt nicht. Oh, my little Yiddish Mädele, or Yingale. Oh, my Bubba, my grandmother, the Polish survivor, said to me, Chaim, I want you to be a Dr. Rabbiner. Yeah, you're from Germany, you know, a Rabbiner, a Dr. Rabbiner. A doctor, a doctor, my son the doctor, and a Rabbiner, and a rabbi. The best of both worlds. The best of both worlds. It took Zalman a long time to find that stability. And he did it. And he did it with honor. He did it with class. And he did it with hard work. And such an important lesson for the young generation, the new generation. Hard work! He finishes in Winnipeg in 1975, and he goes over to Philadelphia. That's where the Jewish renewal movement really flourished. The Pnei Or organization took off there, even though there was the Chabad movement in the late 60s with Arthur Green and Boston and other places, but really it all came kind of the 70s, late 70s, mid 70s too, through the 80s. And Zalman found a home there. And I want to, just conclude with one point because time is of the essence. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All this time that I'm talking about, Zalman lived almost 90 years. That's a long time. You want 125. Okay. We begin with 90, then we get to 125. I got the time. The rabbi says I should continue. Got to listen to the rabbi. The Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, his Rebbe, loved him and cared for him. And I want to give you a few examples so it becomes clear. It's in the book, but just to... In 1970 or 71, there's a rabbi, in fact, the Shine of you had him here, Rabbi Label Wolf. Listen to this. Rabbi Dr. Label Wolf was a great teacher, happens to be a friend as well. My wife's from Australia, he's from Australia. And my wife's grandfather helped him a lot in his youth, having very philosophical discussions with him about God and Torah. So he told me, I interviewed him, he told me, one day he was at Madison, at University of Madison, Wisconsin, and he gets a package in the mail. He opens the package, and there's like pages of translation of Jewish books and writings. From who? From Reb Zalman Schachter. He says he has no idea how Zalman knew that he's at Madison. He didn't ask him. It could be, this is a feeling, I have no proof to it, that the Rebbe told Zalman, send the material for him to use in teaching and educating the college students. Again, I have no proof to that, but that he told me he got it. Years later, Rabbi Wolf had a private audience with the Rebbe about other things. And in the middle of the conversation, the Rebbe says, "Are you in touch with Rabbi Zalman Schachter?" He says, "What?" "Yeah." He says, "No, I'm not." The Rebbe says, "I want you to be in touch with him." So he says, "I want you to take the time and the interest in meeting and spending conversation with Reb Zalman." And this was probably, I have it in the book, I don't remember, late 70s, 77, 78. Another time, he came to 770 in the 80s, not in the 91 I'm going to tell you about soon, in the 80s, and he brought his wife with him. She was more new to Lubavitch, the Chabad. And he tells her about the ins and outs of 770 and the Hasidim and everything else. And he comes to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe smiles and talks to him. Again, a very warm connection. And finally, in 1991, and there's a video of it, I put a picture of that video in the back of the book. And you can hear it online, and there's a transcription of the Yiddish into the English. The Rebbe says to him, he came in September, it was before the High Holy Days. So the Rebbe says to him, "Surely you will bless the Jews through the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing?" Because Reb Zalman was a Kohen, right? You know his full name, Shulam Zalman HaKohen. He was a Kohen, he was a Jewish priest. A Jewish priest is called up to bless the rest of the congregation on the 3 holidays of the year, Passover, Shavuot, and the high holiday season, Sukkot. And the Rebbe tells him, make sure you bless the Jewish people, and surely you'll do that, and God blesses you. That's on the video. 1991 was the last time that he saw the Rebbe, and was the last time that the Rebbe saw him, because the Rebbe had a stroke in 1992. So it is my belief, and it's my position, based on my research, and I welcome anyone else's research, that although formally Zalman went a different way than the Rebbe, right? He went a different way than the Rebbe. I believe he was a chassid at heart till the end. And the proof is, and I finish with this. Look at his tombstone. Yesterday was Zalman's Yahrtzeit. That's why we made also the event associated with his day of 9th year since he's passed. And you know, on a Yahrtzeit, the soul of a person ascends. But it doesn't just ascend and say goodbye to us, have a nice day. It ascends and gives us more energy, more Said yesterday, I was in shul and I took an aliyah. I asked the gabbai to give me an aliyah, and I had in mind Reb Zalman for his soul. I asked the gabbai to give me an aliyah. I didn't tell him why, and in my mind, that's who I had to give the aliyah for his neshama. So, what was the language that Reb Zalman himself put on his tombstone? I investigated this. He wrote his own tombstone. The language. The first two words. Harav in Hebrew. Hatamim. The rabbi, Harav, the rabbi. And now comes the word. Hatamim. Yehudis, tell me, what does Hatamim refer to?
The students of Chabad Yeshiva.
Thank you. Only students of Chabad Yeshivas are coined with that accolade, Hatamim. Because the name of the Chabad Yeshivas, Yehudis said, Mora Yehudis, I'm sorry, said, are Tomchei Tamimim, is the technical name of the yeshiva. Tomchei Tamimim. That's plural, so the singular is Tamim. Rabbi Zalman puts that on his tombstone as the second word after the word rabbi. Why? Because that's who he was. That's where he came from. That's what made him the Jewish renewal rabbi. How, when, what? Do we understand it? How do we reconcile it? Everyone should figure that out on their own. And I'm serious. It's not my place to go and tell. Everyone has to find their own answer. And before I finish, I've said it 3 times, I want to sing a niggin. I want to sing a song because Zalman sang nigunim to me during that 2010 interview in Boulder. And in fact, people have called me to ask if I have the lyrics. But I'm not going to sing the songs that he sang to me. I'm going to sing a song that was originally in Hungarian, and now it's in Yiddish, and then I'll explain it, okay? Some of you know Yiddish. Es krayet shoin der Hon, Tugin kimshainun. Tugin means day. Hon is a rooster. Krayet means it does cock-a-doodle-doo. Es krayet shoin der Hon, Oy Tugin kimshainun. In a grünem Feldo, Pero Pisco, a Feigale spaziert arin. In a green field, a bird with a pearl in its mouth flies around. Vos fara Feigale is those, oi vos fara Feigale is those. What type of bird is this? Oi, what type of bird is this? Then the song says, in a grünem Feldo, Pero Pisco, in a green field with a pearl in its mouth, kein Yerushalayim will he gain. To Jerusalem, it wants to go. It's flying. Where does it want to fly to? To Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem. And then the song continues. Venje vetos sein. Oy veje veto sein. When would that be? We're sitting here in exile 1900 years. When will we go to Jerusalem? When will we have the redemption? When will Mashiach come? And the song answers, She'yiboneh HaMikdosh b'mheira v'yomeinu Tammuz v'to zayin. When the temple will be rebuilt, that's when it will be. And then the song goes, She'yiboneh Beis HaMikdosh b'mheira v'yomeinu b'mheira v'la-la-la-la-la-la-la. When the temple will be rebuilt, when the temple will be rebuilt, that's when we all go together to Jerusalem. May it be speedily in our day. Amen.
Amen.
I dedicate that song to Zalman.
My husband spoke about Hakel. He really brought together many different people from all walks of life, and who each one, I mean, those who knew him well or those who knew him not so well but just were inspired by his teaching, really were affected by him. And so I think that, if Reb Zalman was here sitting on the chair, that chair, any chair at the JCC, he would enjoy this. Because Reb Zalman loved people, he loved life, and the main things he loved Yiddishkeit. And I always said he had a lot of ahavat Hashem, love for Hashem. So in that, and why do I think that he would be happy? Because anything about Judaism, that even if there was dialogue, even if we disagree on many different things, there's so much that unites us and so much that brings us closer. And so, I'm going to start question and answers. I want it to be in, and then I have a few people who are going to speak, just shortly. The question and answers that people shouldn't forget. Just one thing is that I think that when we go out of here today, we should use this talk and this thing to maybe to be nicer to each other and actually learn different things from each other and see how we can incorporate more Judaism into our life. And whatever we can do, that will be a step up to whatever we're doing. So if anyone has any questions, I guess if you can raise your hand, I'll call on one person at a time. And of course, let's try to be respectful. We come from different backgrounds. We have different opinions. And I'm sure we're going to do that in that realm, in that whatever, we'll try that way. So if anyone, you'd like to, if you say your question, please stand up. If we go here.
I'm Bruce Novak. I'm a Jewish and old person.
What is your name?
Bruce Novak.
Nice to meet you.
It was shortened from Nova Misle Ro, which was a Latvian Yiddish name.
Okay.
So I wanted to test something, and I'm trying to be really brief, but I was watching your video the other day, and there was one moment where Zalman, he was always lit up, but this was an explosion. And he was talking about hearing some rabbis say, Judaism is about the future. You remember that moment?
Yes, I do.
So it struck me. So as a Jewish and old person, Heschel is very important to me. Heschel had a famous saying that at Sinai, God gave himself or herself to the Jews. With Hasidism, the Jews decided to give themselves as a community to God.
Very interesting, very nice.
And so I was pretty quick. Here we go. Zalman was a great historic Rebbe. This is my view.
Right.
Because he had this vision, and this is very different from Chabad vision, but that's why you're a good person to test it on. He had this vision of the Jews transforming from al-Kohanim, which is Am-Kohanim, which is what you emphasize, this blessed people where everyone is a priest, to a people who are Nabi'im, where the people where everyone is a prophet of the future, of a better future for the world. And this is also an extension of what Heschel said, which is that today the great Hasids are Barbara Streisand and Albert Einstein. They're bringing the spirit of Hasidism to the world as a whole rather than containing it in Chabad. So I just wanted to, you're my test to whether you think this is a...
Okay. Well, that's a great question and a great point. Heschel was a brilliant mind. And in fact, I don't know if you know this, but it's in the book. Did you know Zalman wanted to work with Heschel?
No.
Zalman wanted to take a position at JTS in 1962 as a mashpia, as a spiritual mentor, teacher. Should I tell you what happened? They invited him. It was a Shabbos. It was a Shabbos. It was Mincha times, the afternoon time. Shabbos, you take out the Torah from the ark. Not only in the morning, but also in the afternoon. When they took out the Torah, Reb Zalman went over to the ark and asked everyone to pray together. The provost of JTS, together with another leader, were there at the time, and it busted their bubble because that was unconventional. This wasn't Chabad. This was JTS, the conservative movement. So the background to what you're saying is true, but you need to know that he revolutionized not just Chabad and Orthodoxy, Reform, Conservative, and even Reconstructionist. He did something very different. And it was something that the Jewish world at the time couldn't handle. They couldn't handle it. They weren't raised that way. That's why in Winnipeg, you know, I was telling Adam here, who brought me from the airport, thank you. On Simchas Torah, Zalman had 1,000 students hovering over him because he was a Pied Piper. He went from shul to shul with his little kids, and he went, come on, let's dance, and they all ended up in his house. 1,000. Which rabbi has 1,000 young people on Simchas Torah hovering over them? Show me one. Today. What?
Cardi-bach.
Okay, Zalman a Karlibach. So he broke the stereotype. And he gave everyone, as Rabbi Chaim Dalfin said, he gave everyone a chance. He introduced it, and whoever wants to accept it, accepts it, or doesn't accept it. But he gave the world that chance. And he brought it, as you said, Heschel's word with Hasidism. So what do we have to do, Chevra? I call you Chevra. You know what we have to do? We have to study Hasidus. That's what Zalman was all about, Hasidus. Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah too. But really to understand Hasidism. And when you delve into Hasidism, you'll appreciate Reb Zalman 100-fold more. That's my answer.
Anyone else who would like to?
Don't be embarrassed. Yes.
Yes.
I
Willa,
just
do you want to
have-
stand up?
I just have a question. I don't see Eve here. Is she all right?
She is all right. Yeah, she decided to be enough. Thank you, Willa. Is there anybody else?
You wanted to ask something in the back? Okay. Yes.
You actually, what made you so curious about Reb Zalman that you wrote this book, that you have done all this study?
Because there was no one like him in the world. From that background to what he did, to the places he was, it's an anomaly. Shlomo Carlebach too, but Zalman even more so. Let me also say, I write and study, thank you, people in communities that on one hand there seems to be diversity, there seems to be differences, disagreements, and my job is to bring them together. Me, the Chabadnik. You can smell a Chabadnik a mile away. And you can see a Chabadnik a mile away. We call this ostentatious Judaism. Right? This Chabadnik met with Zalman, spoke to him, I interviewed over the phone. It's just something that I never experienced. So I came, I flew to Boulder on my own cost to sit with this man and spend 2 hours. And if he was in better health, we could have sat all day, I promise you. It was, you said you saw the video. If you look at his face and my face and the interaction, it was so warm. It was so, we say in Yiddish, geschmack, delicious. It was better. It was geschmack. It was great. Time flew by. That's what made me research him, and that's what made me bring Reb Zalman together with Chabad, with Orthodoxy, with all the movements. There's room for everybody. Yes.
I just want to say that, and I'm from Jewish Renewal, and I only became Jewish Renewal, and I only got very involved in my Judaism until when I moved to Boulder. And I would just invite you, encourage you to truly take on Reb Zalman's thought process that, I mean, I know you said it in words that you want to be a unity thing.
To unite.
Yes, united. But really what I also hear is you want us to see him as more of a Chabadnik than appreciate that the Jewish Renewal has brought so many people back. So it's more like I see him as a Chabadnik and a Jewish Renewal. So I think I just encourage us to be careful that, yes, he has strong foundation of Chabad, Chassid, and thank goodness he found a way to attract all the people who quit Judaism at age 13. So Jewish Renewal was the right time, and you know, it's a real blessing that he took all his background of Hasidism and made it more, I don't know if it's approachable. It's like, so there's too many of us that could not be Hasid, but we can be Jewish Renewal, which gets us closer. And some of the Jewish Renewal went further into their Judaism and became more observant, or are becoming. But there's so many of us that it's so wonderful that we're feeling attached again to our Judaism, because the word isn't approachable, is it? What's the word? Accessible. That's the word I'm trying to. Jewish Renewal makes it more accessible, and that's his gift. He didn't give up a chassid. I was at his funeral. I know. It was so heartwarming that we had the unity. We had the Chabad rabbis there. So I just want to say it's wonderful that you're presenting all the history, and let's give him the appreciation that he made Judaism more accessible to many people.
Thank you, and I want to think about it.
Okay, fair enough. Melissa.
Hi. Thank you for a wonderful talk. I have enjoyed myself immensely. Reb Zalman and I talked about music a lot, and as prayer for the soul. If you know a story about music, would you share it, please?
Sure.
The only problem is, one second, maybe we can do it at the end, because I know that Charna's on her way to something else, and I really do want her to speak.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A couple of reflections. First of all, I want to thank you so much for your beautiful presentation and the thought of you two singing. I wish I had been a fly on the wall because I could just see his face, and I know what those kinds of things meant to him. I was not in the kishkis of Reb Zalman's growth. In fact, I was raised secular. I'll tell you a second who I am. Some of you know me, some of you don't. But I was in Reb Zalman's mind stream. My name is...
Take the microphone, please.
If that's what you need. Thank you. My name is Rabbi Chaim Dalfin, and I'm a rabbi in the Jewish Renewal. I was ordained as a Magi by Reb Zalman in 2007. He is my root teacher, of course, along with my beloved teacher over there, who likes to stay hidden, so I don't even know if I should say his name, but I love you so much. Was a root teacher of mine. And I studied with him greatly. I studied with him at Naropa. I studied with him in every single thing he did. In Boulder for a series of years. I used to come up from Fort Collins. And starting in 2009, I also sat with him and interviewed. I did 54 of them. And by doing 54 interviews, what he did is he gave over to me his spiritual biography and his intellectual history. So I understand and know how he got from restoration to renewal. Renewal was not meant to be a denomination. That came from his students. Jewish renewal was meant to be a fertilizer stick into non-Orthodox Judaism in order to create an accessible way to understand the beauty of this tradition. Reb Zalman was a man who included everything he ever learned, and he transcended it. And this is really what I want to share and be sure everybody understands, because one of the most important things to him ever was Kalal Yisrael. I only saw him in all of those personal, private interviews cry 2 times. One of them was when he found out somebody who he thought might replace him was actually not a good person. I will not name a name. But those who know, know. And when he would talk about Kalal Yisrael and how separate Kalal Yisrael was. There are 12 tribes, there are 12 ways to do Jew, if you will. And each and every one has a place. Think of it, Zebulun and Issachar. Issachar is the Torah studier. What would have happened if his holy brother had not created the merchant money in order to support him? You talked about how important Parnassa is. So that's the first thing I really want to say. You went from New Bedford to Manitoba very quickly, but you missed some very important truths of that time. Because what happened in New Bedford is when he really started to open up. He opened up by studying from Yale psychologists. He found a little world Bible, and he went inside and he found out that the Goyim were smart too. This really influenced him. He realized, then he joined places where he worked with other ministers. He began to open up in the early 50s in New Bedford in a way that completely began the transformation. Because for the longest time he was like, we must restore pre-Holocaust Judaism, restore pre-Holocaust Judaism. And then he was like, wait a second. I am in the trenches with people now. We have to renew it. And he left New Bedford because he kept trying new things, and they didn't renew his contract. It was too visionary. Here's something he said in 1986. He said to a group, our being together is part of visioning together. The purpose is to know how we can best cooperate with what is being birthed at this time. The vision is in the now, and yet its face is to the future. And I think that's what Evie was trying to talk about. He believed, when he met the Rebbe, Menachem Mendel, in Marseille, And he heard him talk on Tu B'Shabbat about eons. He then found within the secular culture where that was also spoken about, and he began to understand the shift that had to happen in order to transcend yet include was very important. He was a Chabad rabbi till the end, but not the Chabad rabbi from your kishkis. He raised the kishkis up into the heart into the mind, and he envisioned something different. This is very important for us to understand that his ever-changing nature was both and. He transcended, he included, he allowed for a new way. And some of the things he thought in the 40s were different from the 50s, different in the 60s, because that's the beauty of him. He continually evolved. I want to say that in all the wonderful interviews that were done, I did not read this book. I've read excerpts. I've talked to people who were interviewed. I've talked to reviewers. I've talked to his family. I've talked to his closest friends. They're not so sure this is all the real Zalman. It's a part of his story. So as we continue to honor this beautiful piece of research, I invite us also to have our curiosity about what has been left unspoken and what are the messages to move into the future to create the kinds of things that we have spoken about. Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for the microphone.
Will there be any other questions before I have Maureen put this end this gathering? Okay, so Maureen, it's a hard act to follow, China.
But she's a good friend, so that helps.
Is it on?
Yeah, it's on. She just turned it off. Did you?
So talking about a chair, I had a chair event also. I don't know if you guys know it, with Rabbi Zalman. So I was brought here to be kind of the spiritual director of a modern Orthodox congregation here. And at one point, somebody had a chair from Germany that was supposed to be the best back support. And I would have loved to have one because I was getting older, like some of you here. But they couldn't, like, protocol wouldn't allow them to transfer that chair to me. So Rabbi Zalman found out about it, and he actually gave somebody some money to buy another chair for me, kind of like office chair, which I do have. And then at the end, somebody who received the other chair gave them to me, two of them to me. Anyway, so I'm just telling you that because Rabbi Zalman's chesed knew no bounds. His Ahavas Yisrael, like people are talking about, his love of Israel and love of the world, love of wisdom of the world, just kept growing and growing and growing. Boulder is the longest place I've ever lived. And a lot of it has to do with Rabbi Zalman. When I first came here, knowing really anybody, nobody, somehow Rabbi Zalman heard about it, and I was at the, I don't know if it's the bus or train station, and I see this Jeep pull out. So, any of you remember Rabbi Zalman's Jeep?
Yeah.
I still have a visual memory of that, and that was him, and he was very happy to pick me up and take me to his house and spend some time with me there. The thing was, I knew him probably longer than some of you are alive here, although I see enough white hair to know possibly that wouldn't have been the case. What happened was, I was living in Worcester, Massachusetts, and Rabbi Zalman happened to be the Schachter, the one who made the match between the Chabad rabbi and Rebbitzin there. And Sukkot, my birthday is on Sukkot. This Sukkot, I'm going to be, God willing, 80 years old, so I hope some of you come to my party, whatever it may be. Anyway, so I go to services during Sukkot, and I'm looking across the mechitza, the divider, and I see this person wearing this rainbow talit, and I've never in my life seen a rainbow talit before. And I kept staring at it. And meanwhile, he was staring at this young woman holding a lulav and etrog, which in those days was very rare for young young Orthodox women even to go to services with the lulav and etra. We kept staring at each other, and that's how we became friends from that moment on. And that was, I would say, maybe 60 years ago. So we stayed friends off and on writing. He would also send me some of his writings. But what I want to say, you know, he believed like I did that nothing is by accident in this world. Everything is basher. Everything is meant to be for a divine purpose. And today happens to be a month from the giving of the Torah. The 6th day of Sivan, and now we have the 6th day of Tammuz. And yesterday, Reb Zalman's 9th Yahrtzeit. And I remember speaking at his memorial service, and I mentioned that, and nobody found it until I saw other people find it later on. But what's special about the 5th of Tammuz? It's actually written in the prophets, talking about the prophets. The Haftorah, the prophetical reading from the first day of Sukkot, of Shavuot, happens to be the beginning of the chapter of Ezekiel. And in that chapter, how does the chapter start? Ezekiel had his vision on the 5th day of the 4th month, which would have been yesterday, Reb Zalman's Yahrtzeit. So when I saw that, I told everybody I knew, do you know what Reb Zalman's Yahrtzeit was? Ezekiel's vision. And what was the vision? The vision was what's called Ma'aseh Merkavah, the vision of the chariot. So I made this connection in my mind right away. Who is this Rabbi Zalman? And like Rabbi Chaim and other people said, by the way, I also have a connection with Rabbi Chaim, goes way back, because I taught his sister. So again, nothing is by accident. We're all intertwined here. 6 degrees of.
And Rebbetzin Rachel is my Schwieger's sister. Rachel Fogelman.
And that was the couple that Reb Zalman made a shidduch with.
Yes.
So, anyway, so what's the significance of this? How are my memories of Reb Zalman that are so all-inclusive, like Sharon and Rabbi Dalfin was saying? I saw him, I studied with him. When he studied, or especially when he prayed, he would just go elsewhere. He would go to many, many different worlds. Maybe more than in our worlds even, and just be in that kind of ecstatic state. But one time, I was invited, I went to his house on Thanksgiving, and there was Reb Zalman wearing an apron and ready to serve and going around, can I help you? You need something else? And he also wanted to serve me something else that I won't mention here. But I basically said thanks, but no thanks. So that was him. He was a Merkava. In my mind, he was like this chariot going up and down, up to the highest worlds, down to the lowest world, and everywhere in between with perfect comfort and joy and simcha and delight in everything in existence. So it's so fitting that his Yahrtzeit was the day that the vision of the chariot, the Merkava, going up and down. He told one story, Zalman told one story in his book that was very delightful. The first Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Zalman, he had to decide where he's going to go in the world, who's going to be his rabbi. And he thought about going to Vilna because the Vilna Gaon was like the biggest genius in the world. But then he wanted to experience Hasidus, the more Kishke teachings. So he went to the Maggid of Mezrich, the Mezrich Maggid, but he really wanted balance, just like Reb Zalman wanted so much about balance. So Rabbi Chaim Dalfin went to the Maggid of Mezrich, and he goes into the hall, and a lot of the students are there, and they're talking about the vision of the chariot. He has this in his book, and some of them are dancing, some of them are doing somersaults, some of them are singing, some of them making roars like lions because that's part of the vision of the chariot. So he wasn't so sure if that's the place he wanted to be. It seemed a little too wild. And then Mezrich Maggid walks in, and he says, he quotes one of the verses from Ezekiel's vision. and he opens his hands like this. And the verse was, now I think of it, Terapena Kanfe, Ba'amdam Terapena Kanfehem.
Yes.
When they stood, their wings were folded up. So that was the Maggid signal for everybody to cool it a little bit. You know, you don't want to leave this world. You want to be here. And Rabbi Zalman explains it as if the fiery heart had to be tamed by a brilliant brain. So that's again the top and the bottom, the highest and the lowest coming together. And finally, you know, on Shavuos we read about all the Jews camping around the mountain. Rabbi Chaim was talking about unity. Ki ish echad b'lev echad, like one person with one heart. And that's the word vayichan, that camp, which also has chen in it, because each one saw grace in the eyes of the other. And Rashi kind of sardonically says, it wasn't there before, and it wasn't there so much after. But at that moment, at the giving of the Torah, all the Jewish people were like one person with one heart. And I believe it, I feel it, and I see it with people in Boulder. This was Reb Zalman. He was, his love for Israel, his love for Torah, his love for God was Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. And may we continue to emulate and be inspired by that model.
Amazing.
Amen.